the biggest thing on clover is stress. Well, really, really cold weather stress it, and really, really hot weather stresses it.
Well, that's like when it gets hot and in the summer.
Yeah.
If we've got stuff growing in it, I always tell them, don't mow it.
No, the latest research says don't mow it at all. Just use these selective herbicides to take care of it.
One of the easiest things we've found as far as low maintenance is concerned once it's growing in shady environments, and not really having to have big equipment to turn ground. If you can find a way to get the dirt somewhere to show, and you frost seed clover, so this is going to probably be more so for people in the Midwest.
Yep.
And you frost seed clover, and you go out in February when that ground's freezing and thawing, you can have a beautiful, perfect clover food plot that you got to just mow and spray with clethodim once a month.
Yep.
And not have to turn dirt. You just got to be able to find a way to get the dirt visible, because when it freezes and thaws, it pulls that seed into the ground for you.
Sure. No, and that's what that thing, Miss. Oh, I'm sorry. The number one in some of these questions that y'all said, I've kind of skirted around it not to get there because I wanted to give time, like you just did, to give clover its place. Because if you only planted one thing, clover would be it. There's no question. If you're in Nashville, Tennessee North, all right, you can frost seed. Now, you can frost seed Nashville South, but it's hit or miss if it works or not. But frost seeding, Nashville is kind of what I've learned. Nashville North, which basically gets you in the Midwest, then frost seeding is phenomenal. You already got bare ground. Everything's dead. You know, you can even, if you got a light skipping of snow there, you can throw it on top of the snow because eventually it's going to work its way down. Because here's the thing, that clover seed's not going to germinate until conditions get right, until things start to green up. And what happens when you're talking about frost seeding, so essentially the ground, the moisture in the ground comes out of the ground. It bubbles up. And how many times have we tried to slip in when we're crunch, crunch, crunch? If you got a heavy, very bubbled up soil, man, just wait till it thaws out and then get in there. But anyway, because it's tough to get in there and not make a lot of noise. But what that does, it just bubbles up, so you put the seed on top, and then as the ground thaws, it literally pulls the seed into the soil. So that's what's going on with that process. And again, that clover seed is not going to germinate until temperatures get to a certain temperature, conditions get right, and then they're going to blow. And then maintenance of clover, regardless how you plant it, regardless. In the South, we establish clover during the fall, and you don't see it very much. It gets about that big, you know, especially perennial clovers. Perennial clovers are your white clovers, any kind of white clover or red clover. And when I say red clover, I'm not talking crimson. I'm talking a medium red, a Bardura red, a true red clover. A true red clover has a purple flower, not a red top. So these are what will be perennial clovers. And actually a red clover is technically classified as a biannual, but they're very prolific seeders, so we throw them into the perennial clover category. So those are what's perennial. So, and we establish those during the fall. You see them a little bit, but where you really see them is during the summertime. They are during the spring because they blow. And and here in the South, I mean, green up starts at the end of February, you know. So it starts getting green end of February, 1st of March. Where you guys, you're talking 1st of probably April or something like that. So if you are Clayton, if you are doing a frost seed, you can do it now for that matter. I mean, you can do it at any point, you know, whatever, give it a month before whatever your green up is, do it a month before green up, or at least 2 weeks before green up. That's getting kind of nitpicky because the weather can change a good bit in 2 weeks. So I always say a month before green up, you can frost seed. Or before that, at least a month. The month's kind of the cutoff on doing that. But regardless how you establish it, if it's traditional or if it is frost seeded, then you get into the maintenance. And that's kind of what I wanted to get into. And Clayton mentioned the chemical clethodim. It's a grass-specific herbicide. Grass is the most limiting thing to clover. And you want to spray that as soon as you start seeing any other grasses start coming up. I don't care if they're that tall, you get in there and you can spray it. It will not hurt the clover at all. All right. If you have broadleaf weeds come up in that, other things beside clover, you use something called Butarac or 2,4-D-B that they call it. And I always use generics, so who knows what the name's going to be on the label. But know these chemicals. Clethodim is one. There are other grass-specific herbicides. Besides that, Clethodim is definitely my favorite. It's what I always use. And then Butarac. It could be Butarac 200. It could be called something, and it's 2,4-D-B. But the B stands for the Butarac. That's where that comes from. And you can spray that. And Butarac actually has a little bit more residual, and so it's going to last a little longer than the Clethodim. Depending on the food plot, you may have to spray Clethodim 2, 3, 4 times because, again, you have those grass seeds coming out of the soil. Also, grass seeds will blow in. And so just watch it. You see some grasses coming up, spray it with Clethodim. If you see some broadleafs coming up, spray it with Butarac. And the biggest thing on clover is stress. Well, really, really cold weather stresses it, and really, really hot weather stresses it. Other than that, clover is going to be rocking. So when it's really, really hot, don't do anything. Stay off of it because you don't want to stress it anymore.
That's like when it gets hot and in the summer.
Yeah.
If we've got stuff growing in it, I always tell them, don't mow it.
No.
Leave it alone
No.
because it's giving it shade.
Yep.
It needs that. Otherwise, it's going to burn out.
Yep. And that's the thing, too, with mowing. So much of the traditional research, you got to mow it every month or whatever. Don't mow it once it gets – if you got to – the latest research says don't mow it at all. Just use these selective herbicides to take care of it.
The deer will mow it for you.
The deer will mow it for you. If you have to mow it in the spring and then mow it maybe right before fall. But don't mow it when it's really hot because mowing is going to put stress on it. So try to stay away from mowing altogether if you can. But if you do mow in early spring or sometime during the spring where everything's still actively growing, and when you mow it, all it's going to do is come back. If you get some really tall weeds or something and you have to mow it, that's when you can mow it. But try to do that as early as you can. And then when it gets really, really hot, stay off of it. So also in the maintenance of clover is fertilizer. I'll fertilize twice a year. I'll fertilize early spring. When everything's growing and doing its thing, I'll use a fertilizer. And I've been using, Clayton, a lot of and there's a bunch of them out there now. You can go to an ag place and get it or wherever you can get it, is these foliar, like I was talking about, these foliar fertilizers. And I mix the foliar fertilizer in with the Clethodim. In one pass, it's fertilized and it's sprayed. And it just kills everything. So, and it gives the fertilizer.
Are you mixing the the Butarac in there with the Clethodim at the same time? Because there's a lot of guys that are weekend warriors. They might be traveling 6 hours away to a different state to take care of their farm. I mean, if you can mix everything at once and get it all done in one pass, that's a huge victory.
You definitely can. Most of the time, and I have done it before, but most of the time I don't. Because I don't need the Clethodim. You need Clethodim early because the first thing that grows is the grasses. Those broadseeds, those evasive broadleaves, typically don't grow till a little bit later. So it's usually a separate, my last spraying is typically a broadleaf spraying if I spray it. Now I will say this, some of those broadleaves that grow out there are great deer food. And I posted some things before talking about that with pictures of several different things. And I'm not going to get in those varieties because that's some geeky biology stuff that I'm not going to get into. But so essentially, if that clover plot, if it's 70, 80% clover and got 20 to 30% weeds that are in there, let it go. Let those broadleaves go because what you'll start seeing is deer browsing on those broadleaves. Now, once it gets over that, then it's going to start taking over your clover plot. Then you want to do something with it. So, and then maybe you just clip it really, really high. There's a lot of times I'll set the bush hog up really, really high that never touches the clover, and it just knocks the top off of those other things. And again, the deer will start eating on that. So there's a lot of different ways to maintain your clover. Every clover plot is different. And so I don't mind having some, a few broadleaf weeds out there because I see deer eating on that almost as much as I see them eating on the clover.
Well, the other thing about clover too is if you do mess up and you mow it when it's too hot or something, or it doesn't get rain and it kind of stunts it,
Yeah.
it bounces back better than anything else.
Yeah, it does.
At least as far as I've noticed.
Yeah, and what it's doing, let me just tell you the nature of clover. So once things, when it gets really cold or when it gets really hot, they go into a dormant mode. Most of the time they're not dead. No, they can die if things get really extreme, like any plant can. It goes into a dormant mode, and basically it shuts off everything up top, so it reserves the nutrients. It's reserving that root ball. It's keeping that root ball alive. So it shuts everything off on top, and then that top gets browsed down by the deer, and there's nothing there, but that root ball is still underneath the soil. It's still there. And then when conditions get right, it's amazing how it explodes. I mean, it's like you got all that amped up energy, and then conditions get right, and it just jumps out of the ground. Clover's really cool in watching that. We've done so many different time lapses on these clover fields, so we know what they do and when they do it.
Yeah. Now, so that would be more of a summer, early season forage. Let me ask you, I guess